Welcome to our cemetery tour. Glad you came. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a history of the cemetery. The Bunker Hill Cemetery Association is one of a very few privately owned, historic, non-profit, and actively operating cemeteries in the state of Washington. The first burial was in 1877, when Washington was still a territory. The association was incorporated in October 1889, which was 1 month before Washington became a state in November of 1889. The association is made up of individuals and families that purchase burial plots for themselves and their loved ones. And by the way, I've got my spot already. I have grandparents, parents, first husband, and a lot of cousins buried here. So I'm joining a good group. Each individual or family then becomes a voting member of the association and is responsible for maintaining their graves and the general maintenance of the cemetery. Presently, there are close to 1,000 people buried here. 178 veterans are buried here, dating from the Civil War to present. The burial sites are located in 3 sections. We have Section A, Section B, Section C, and Section D, which is nobody there yet, but eventually. Just cars for now. The oldest part is Section B, back here. So the oldest burials are back there, and then they started burying up here and then moved over to this one. The building here was built and put up in 1990, so it's relatively new to the area. The Bunker Hill Cemetery Association has 5 board members who are elected for 5-year terms, and I've been on the board a few times, so it's a wonderful spot here on top of the hill. How could you not find a better place? Anyway, enjoy your tour. I'm going to send you on to the next place, and that's straight ahead there to Tom. He'll tell you a little bit about one of the graves up there. Thank you.
Thank you. So good afternoon, or good evening. My name is John Thomas Anderson. I was born May 8, 1893 in Mount Solo, Washington, before Longview even existed. In 1894, my family purchased property up on Eufaula Heights, where we lived and farmed where I grew up, and eventually became a logger for many years, following the footsteps of my grandfather and father. Logging camps in western Washington were rough and tumble places. Logging was tough work, being physically demanded and could be dangerous, with logging consistently listed as one of the most dangerous jobs in America. Workers risked injury not only from falling out of trees or having trees falling on them, but also because they often worked in locations far away from hospital to receive any type of medical treatment. Most of the loggers were single men that worked 10-hour days, made decent pay, but had few things to spend it on. Fallers, working in pairs, cut the trees by hand using axes and cross-cut saws. We had to use great care to make the trees fall in the proper direction in order to prevent breakage and to place the timber in the best position to be hauled out. After the trees had been felled, buckers stripped the bark from the logs and sawed them into suitable lengths. Another set of workers then placed the logs onto oiled skids, small planks or logs, and hauled them to the main skid road, where teams of oxen would yard or drag the logs to the mill or to the landing on a river. With the invention of the steam locomotive and steam steel rails, that soon led to these being employed for forestry. However, the difficult terrain within forest made that narrow gauge railways, which took up less space, were lighter and easier to build and enabled tight curves to be laid where preferred. These were the so-called forest railways that traversed across the area. In particularly large areas of forest, of unusually large trees, the extensive forest railways were often built using standard gauge exclusively for those forest tracks. Special geared locomotives such as the Shay were developed for high tractive support effort on the rough track and terrain. The lumber industry itself often used an ethnic and racial hierarchy to allocate the various tasks. Falling and millwork paid the best, and these jobs were generally reserved for whites born in North America or Northern Europe. However, even within the Northern European ethnicities, there was bigotry. Swedes would not hire Finns at times because Sweden at one time had reigned over Finland and considered themselves superior. My grandfather was a Finn, and one logging camp refused to hire a dumb Finn. My grandfather had his American citizenship papers, and since he was an American and proof that he was not a Finn, he got hired. He used to joke that maybe he wasn't such a dumb Finn after all. As loggers, we lived in isolated places most of the time. In our spare time, we drank, gambled, and made our own music, and sometimes even fought for entertainment. Sometimes there was a fiddle player or someone had an accordion. My brother Nick was an avid accordion player and provided lots of entertainment, and I was coerced into dancing to the music many times. We slept in sometimes squalid bunkhouses, sometimes called dog houses. And as we kept working as a lumberjack for the different timber companies around the area, those living conditions led to the labor unrest and dissatisfaction and propelled the Wobblies and early unions to form. When World War I came along, I entered into the service to help my country and to protect the democracy. Logging was an essential industry to support the war effort. Because of my logging skills, rather than going overseas to be on the direct lines, I was assigned to be part of the Spruce Division, a special home front corps of soldiers. In the spring of 1917, as the United States was joining the war, the Allies suffered many casualties of pilots and airplanes. The British and French militaries realized that it was not enough to try to compete with German technology. They needed to be able to manufacture enough airplanes and train enough pilots to overwhelm the Germans. The Allies ordered 100 million board feet of lumber from the United States, and by the end of the war, the Spruce Production Division had produced nearly 185 million board feet. The spruce logged and cut by the soldiers of the Spruce Division allowed the Allies to build more airplanes, and from that lumber, between 1917 and 1918, lumber from the Northwest was used to build 16,952 U.S. Army airplanes, 4,881 French planes, 258 British planes, and 59 Italian planes. Why did they use spruce? Spruce had the necessary properties of toughness, lightness, and resiliency to make it ideal for building airplanes. Simply put, spruce did not splinter as easily when hit by gunfire, and made it the best choice to build the airplanes. During my time serving in the Spruce Division, I was in an accident and kicked by a horse. I sustained some injuries that placed me into the Madigan Hospital as a result. I never fully recovered from those injuries, and years later, when an x-ray was taken, there were still visible hoof marks from that kick. After the war was over, I went back to logging and remained close with my family. In 1930, my brother Andrew passed away from blood poisoning that stemmed from working in a fishing cannery. The Great Depression was going on, and my sister-in-law Nellie was now a widow with 3 children, Vi, Edna, and Arnold. Times were tough for everyone, and life was difficult. It was then that I decided to give up logging and that lifestyle, and in 1934 married Nellie, and in 1936 we had a daughter, Mildred. On October 29, 1953, my life here on Earth ended, succumbing to the pain and injuries from my logging days. I was buried here at Bunker Hill Cemetery, which my grandfather and father helped log, and received a set of plots as pay for their work on clearing the land for the cemetery. Thank you for listening to and sharing my memories. So then after Nellie died, the joint headstone for them was put in, and his marker that was from his original burial.
And if you were here last year, I was talking about mostly my teaching career and my poultry career. And this year I'm going to talk a little bit about, how we met to start off with.
How did we meet?
Well, I was teaching school in Goldendale, remember?
I lived in Goldendale.
Yes. Before then, I had gone to school and gotten a degree in mathematics, and excuse me. at that time, there were no jobs for women that did mathematics, so I went back to school and got a teaching certificate so that I could get a job and teach school. I did teach in the Stella area for a while first, and then wound up in Goldendale, and my little one-room schoolhouse had a trough in front for people to come and water their horses. And well, the first time he came by, and the second time, after a few times to water his horse, I went out. You know, you might as well get acquainted with folks.
And Mary's pretty talkative.
Well,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, six weeks later, we were married.
Yeah. Don't need to waste time.
So for a while there, we lived, excuse me, we lived in his dad's bunkhouse, and then after being there a while, I was kind of hankering to come back to Stella because I'd grown up in this area. So your dad got wind of some land that was for
Yeah,
sale.
there was property being foreclosed right up here on the end of the road, and since my brothers all got their share of his estate, and he had how many acres?
50,000 acres.
So anyway, but we didn't want to live in Goldendale. So, or Mary didn't want to live in Goldendale anyway, and so we moved out here, and we started farming, and there was a good patch of timber on the west side, so I logged that and built a sawmill, cut the timber and railroad ties. That worked out really well. Got big enough, I built another mill down in Longview, down by Fiber, and that was in 1944, wasn't it?
Yes, dear.
Thompson Sawmill, I don't know. So anyway, and that sawmill went really well. Started another mill up over by Lewiston, in Whippy, and that one went really well.
Yeah,
And-
he was a good businessman.
Farming was good. We had about 50 head of cattle, and you know, a few pigs, you know,
And I had chickens,
and yeah,
5,000 of them.
chickens were her thing. That was her business, not mine.
I sold eggs, but I also sold new little chicks to people that wanted to also have chickens. And
Yeah, you had a whole incubator building
yes,
to raise these baby chicks.
and we had hired help to come and all this work.
Oh, Mary was, yeah.
One thing I was not going to do is milk cows. So we had that hired man.
Yeah, you were really good at finding help. We were down Portland one day, down by Skid Row, and there was this drunk. And so she says,
He looked stout.
Milo, you want to come work for us? And Milo worked for us until 1957. And he said that you guys saved my life. So, yeah.
Well, then one day, my husband, the businessman, visiting with the accountant, informed me that the egg business was no longer making money. So that was the end of that.
Wasn't profitable. Get rid of the chickens. So anyway, so lumber business was still going well until about 1957, wasn't it?
Well, I don't know. I was busy thinking about that new car we went and bought.
Yeah. Okay, that's another story too. Yeah. We needed a new car, so there was this family airfare rate, but you had to have kids with us. So the two of the kids weren't able to go, but Bobby did.
Bobby did.
And so we took Bobby on a plane, clear to Flint, Michigan, buy a new car, and it was one of those
Wasn't-
milk
yes.
run, hop, stopped in Fargo, every place else in between. Finally got there, got the car,
Cadillac.
drove that new Cadillac all the way home. Yep. And then, but I wanted an airplane.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, so I bought an airplane, but my eyes weren't all that good. I had one nearsighted eye and the other one was farsighted. And they would not give me a pilot's license with that kind of eyes.
You didn't want to waste money buying glasses.
No, hey, it's a waste. Worked fine for me, you know. So anyway, I just hired Willie Taft out of Kelso Airport, and he flew me back and forth to Lewis and stuff like that. So one day, Willie's supposed to come pick me up. He never showed up. And he never showed up. So anyway, finally he got a hold of Mary and he got a hold of me, and he was flying up the Columbia River, just visual flight. He had no radio. He took a wrong turn somewhere. So he flew around far enough. He finally found an airport, landed, and it turned out to be Fairchild. So he was stuck there for a while. So Mary had to come get me. But it all worked out. Yeah. Well, until, yeah, it was in 47, the mill burned, right?
When the mill blew?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Mary was wrangling some new insurance for her business. She's supposed to have it done by Tuesday or by Friday, and anyway, so Tuesday she was working on it. Would have had it. And it was like Wednesday or Thursday, there was a thunderstorm. And lightning hit and burnt that mill down. No insurance. Business was over. Mary told me, you're not rebuilding. You're done.
No.
So we retired.
Yes. Got a place in Arizona to go to in the winter time.
Yeah, too cold up here in the winter. Yep. So it worked out well.
Yes.
And Mary and Lauren had how many children?
They had 3 girls.
3, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, Hattie Lou and Bobby and Claire.
Yep.
Okay. I see.
Yeah.
I knew Hattie Lou.
You knew Hattie Lou? Yeah. Yeah, Hattie Lou and Jerry had the tavern downtown, the Shamrock. Mhm. Yeah. Yep. They had that forever. Huh? Did they? I don't know. Did they? Later on? Yeah. Yeah. Hey. So, yeah, you guys. Well, there's other little tidbits and stories. You know, the neighbor kids would come up and play with the grandkids, and one day Charles, my grandson, he was playing with the neighbor kid up in the barn. And they found some hay hooks and started knocking knot holes out of the boards on the floor. That was kind of fun, you know, you just knock them out and down they go. Well, I didn't like that. So I made them boys nail tin can lids over all those holes. Didn't want the mice getting in the hay.
And that solved the problem.
Yep, fix that.
They were nice little boys.
Yeah.
Just having fun.
But Mary is pretty generous, though. She was really nice. She was a nice lady. On Easter, she'd give the neighbor kids a call and say, hey, I think I saw an Easter bunny running around in my front yard. You guys want to come up and take a look? So the kids would go up there and look around. Yeah, there'd be a little plastic Easter egg, you know, some candy. But in one of the Easter eggs, there was a silver dollar. She did that for years. Wow. Very generous. Nice lady. That's why I married her that fast. So you got it. Fairchild. It's military. No, he was going to Lewiston, Idaho.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I took a wrong turn.
He was a lot lost. So what did your father do in Goldendale that made him so prosperous in land?
You probably know more details than I do.
Well, he had the land and raised cattle. And
Yes, yeah.
Just
I guess just cattle
he had
rancher.
how many acres of land?
What do you say, 50,000?
acres.
That's a whole lot of acreage.
Yeah.
He must have had a lot of cattle.
Well, back in those days, it was a lot of donation land claims and
Oh, was it? Okay.
yeah,
I suppose, yeah.
yeah. So
Wow. I mean, that's like, gosh,
I know, today we can't even comprehend it. You get 5 acres, and that's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. My family, we had a farm in Oshkosh, Wisconsin with 100 acres. That was huge. So I can't even imagine that much. Well, thank you for your story.
Well, thank you. Yeah. You guys have any more questions? Yeah, we can make up lies.
At the Bunker Hill School, which is over that way, I was living with my mother and my stepfather over on Stella Road, and the horse would bring me over on Monday morning, and I would have a change of clothes with me, and then I would send the horse back on its way, and eventually it would get back home over there on Stella Road.
The horse knew his way home.
Back on Friday to pick me up.
Never found its way back.
And some in the later time of the year, it got dark early, and it was kind of scary. I remember a bear one time. I could smell it,
Oh, yeah.
and I suppose it could smell me, but I got home safely.
Yeah. Yeah, the kids told me one day that they're riding bikes back towards the end of the road, back on the hill back there, and they saw a bear, and they came around real quick and went back home. And then another time, they felt something was following them. They were walking back from Stella. They'd come across the old bridge and up McAdam Road that way. And the next day they looked, and there was cougar tracks in their footprints.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so yeah, they were right. There was somebody following them.
There's probably still a whole lot of them up here.
Oh, there's some around.
So are there other roads that branch off from this road back here?
The road just down the bottom of the hill right here, if you go left, it connects to Abernathy Road.
Oh, it does.
Yeah, the one to the right used to come out at Stella. There used to be an old wooden bridge across the creek down there before Ocean Beach Highway was built.
Okay.
And that's how you got from Stella up to here.
Oh, okay.
There used to be no highway down along the river.
If you look, I think there's some books over there in the building. There's
Yeah.
some pictures of it.
I'm going to grab that.
Yeah, there's a lot of pictures, a lot of cool stuff in
I've
those
only been
books.
here 9 years, but I'm too afraid to get up in these hills.
Oh,
I'm going to get lost.
nah, you can't go too far.
Bear's going to come and get me.
Nah.
Well, thank you again. very much.
Stella was. Yeah.
Was, but it's for a long time.
It had a post office.
Yeah.
Stella had a post office, which is the museum building down there, one of the 3 buildings that's down there. Bunker Hill didn't have that. It had the school, and it was a community.
But now it's all part of Longview, right?
Yeah, it's all Longview address now. Yeah.
It's outside the city limits, but you know,
Unincorporated.
where do you send your kids to school?
Yep.
Where do you go to the post office now?
Yeah.
Grocery store, and those things called gas stations.
Oh yeah. Well, there used to be one on every corner. There used to be one at Stella.
Yes.
There was going to be one at the bottom of the hill down here, but they never got that far. It became a house, and right now it's where that RV's sitting. But underneath all that house frontage, there's an old metal service station building in that thing,
really?
incorporated in that somehow. Yeah, it's still there. Yeah.
But it's an apartment building now.
Oh no, I was talking about the one at the bottom of the hill here. Yeah,
excuse me.
yeah. Les Baker built that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm Stella.
You're on Stella. Yeah, yeah. That's an apartment building down at Stella. Oh yeah, they used to have dance hall down there at Stella, and that was the happening place on a Friday night.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, they had like 100 guys like come out of the woods.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That was a boat stop too on the river too, right?
yeah, it was. Yeah,
Couple of big log rafts,
Cigar wrap.
rafts.
yep. That's where they built those, right there.
My thing is, how do
And
people
it's
decide
Stella?
to come way up on the top of the hill?
It's
to start
Stella
building?
Wood that rebuilt San Francisco after the big earthquake.
Yeah, those log rafts.
They did it to avoid the flooding a lot.
Oh, that's true.
That's why her parents moved up on Eufaula Heights because they kept flooding out down
Down
the
the line. Oh.
Yep.
Never thought. That does make sense.
Yeah.
They need bigger hills out there in Skamaka and Deep River, don't they?
Our next stop is right over here behind us.
All right, great. Thank you so much for your
Yeah, there was one year when they used rowboats getting it out of the store.
Hello friends from the future, I am Willis Johnson and I've been a resident here of Stella for most of my life. However, my story begins back in Arkansas. Our story begins back in Arkansas in 1907. I'm the eldest son of William Travis Johnson and his wife Ada Day
Grace
Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Unfortunately, my mother died when I was only 13 years old in a house fire, and my father ended up remarrying. And he married Mary Frank Johnson, and they had 7 more children. Now, in the earlier years of my employment, up until the early 1930s, I was making oak staves for the whiskey barrel business, which there was quite an interest in that at the time. I made barrels for both the, we'll say the taxed variety and for the off the books variety.
Yeah. Yeah. And so my name is Lula Mae Edwards Johnson, and you can call me Lula. And of course, I was born in Arkansas as well. I was born in 1907. And my folks, my mother was born in Arkansas, my mother Lissy Bell Hodge Edwards, but my dad was born in Kentucky, my dad William Demps Edwards. And we had a very large family. We had 11 of us children, all from the same mother and papa. So it's a lot of mouths to feed. And the way we grew up, we lived off the land. We were a people of the land in many ways. We had to raise our own livestock. We raised cattle, we raised hogs, and we had to grow our own food from the ground. And what we would harvest from that, we would use to cook and eat. And and all of us kids, well, we had to do back then what were called chores. Who remembers what a chore is? A few of you. Some of you are spoiled. Jeez. Okay. So we had to do chores. We had to carry our weight around the house and the property. So us girls, of course, would help Mama and Grandma around the house, but we also had to help Dad out in the fields as well. So we would help tend to the livestock. We would help plow the fields and harvest the crops. And we even had to bring water back into the house from the well. We didn't have any plumbing back then. That was a long time ago. So that was what some of our life was like. Now, of course, we worked a lot. We also went to school, but our school year was very short there. It was only 3 months. Of course, it was always also very small. It was a one-room schoolhouse, and we had one teacher. And back then, she had the authority to discipline us. So if we got out of line, guess what? We got a spanking. So anyway, that kept us in line for the most part. And now, we also had some fun too. So we would stay up late at night and play cards. Of course, late at night, what about a bedtime? Well, we didn't have one. We just stayed up late at night. And we'd use a lantern to light the space that we were in so that we could see what cards we were playing and all that. So we stayed up late playing cards, and then on days that we didn't have so much work, we'd go visit our family and friends in the area. We had lots of family in the area. So we were always doing that. That was a big part of our social lives. And well, of course, then at some point I met this guy. Cook on. And we kept living our ways just as we had when we were raised, as our parents had had shown us how to do.
Lula and I were blessed with 6 children, 5 of which were delivered by her grandmother, who was a midwife. Our 6 children were...
So we have Mitch. We have Marvin, Vernon, Faye, Gay, and little Joyce. Yes, little Joyce.
So we had 6 children. It's hard to keep track of them all. We have so many children. And we had them all in a 9-year period of time, which means we made really good use of our spare time.
Hey, you're not supposed to tell them that. Well, at least we know they were all from the same mama and papa. Ha 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 ha.
So when we got married, though, we didn't have that much money. So it took 2 years for me to save up the money to buy the ring for my wife here. $3.50 out of the Montgomery Ward catalog. And isn't that a beaut? We also purchased 40 acres, and we built a 2-story house, and I did all the fencing work around the property. Now, living in Arkansas, where we had only a period of school that lasted for 3 months, I felt like education was going to be a little bit of a limitation for my children. I only had an 8th grade education, but I valued the importance of it. And I served on the school board. So I wanted better for our children, but I also wanted better for our family. During the Great Depression, there weren't that many jobs over in the Ozark Mountains. So we communicated with our friends, the Ammons, who had migrated all the way over to Washington, to this, outside the city that was a planned city called Longview, I believe it was.
Longview.
And so he said to come on out and they'd help us get started on a new life. So we began our preparations, which took several months. We cured our meat, we canned our food, we bought tents, we loaded up our car, we put all of our furniture in it. Actually, it wasn't a car, it was a 1931 Chevy pickup truck. And everything was loaded in there, including our family and your brother-in-law and your brother and our dog Trixie.
Don't forget about Trixie. Gosh, always forgetting about Trixie.
So with everybody in the car and $100, we headed on down to strike our luck out west.
Man, and what a trip it was. And it was so great that as soon as we got to Oklahoma, the motor burned out of that darn truck. So, well, we were kind of stuck. So we had to figure out what we were going to do, because we really needed to get here. That was our goal. So we found a car to buy, but in order to pay for it, we had to get rid of our food. We had to sell all of our furniture. Of course, none of that stuff fit in the car anyway. It was a very small car. And when you have 9 people in there, it's pretty tight quarters, plus the dog, who I'm sure was on somebody's head. Anyway, so we came out in the car, and we had a few little bumps along the way, but we kind of put some stress on that car too, with so many of us in that tiny little thing. Well, the door popped open one day and little Marvin fell out. So we stopped and we went and we got him. He was okay though. He was okay. He wasn't scratched up or anything, which, yeah, back in that day, you couldn't drive very fast anyway. Those cars were not built to drive like they do now. So if somebody fell out, it was okay. But I wouldn't advise doing it today.
So we couldn't drive that fast because we had an old car that wasn't working so well. And as we came into Longview, we had this aroma that hit us that we had never smelled before. The smell of the smelter, the pulp mill, everything. It just took us by storm. But I also realized that was the smell of industry, the smell of jobs, the jobs that we were promised that we could have. So with barely any gas, no money, leaking oil, we just barely creeped into the Ammon's place. However, upon emptying the car out, we did find 35 cents in the car. So we were certainly not penniless, which we were thankful for. The Ammons took us in and let us stay in one of their abandoned houses across the creek. Now, we came to Longview at a really difficult time. It was 1935, and there was a strike going on. And so there was no jobs. So I had to piece one little odd job here and there together to make ends meet. But eventually, by September, the strike ended and I got hired by Long Bell. And I moved our family to a company house over on 9th Avenue, where the rent was only $7.50 a month. However, Lula here just didn't seem to like having the urban lifestyle. She was more of a country girl. And so at her prompting, we decided to move over to Stella and rent a place from the Williamsons for $5 a month.
Well, you know, those townspeople, they can be a little crazy and wild sometimes. And I just didn't think they were going to be a good influence on my children, especially my boys. And so, anyway, so we moved back out in town, out in the country.
Time flew, and before we knew it, it's 1945, and the winds of change came again when the Ammons decided to move to Florida. They also decided to sell us their house, their 40 acres, most of their belongings, all lock, stock, and barrel, for $4,200. Now we finally had electricity, which was a relief to have. Later on, we acquired another 28 acres, and so that was a nice piece of land to have where we could start our company later on. After 9 years of working for Long Bell, I decided to become a Jippo logger and begin a company with my 2 sons as equal partners. We named it Willis Johnson and Sons.
That's our hat from our company. So we had our company that we put together, and I joined in on the logging operation a bit as well. And except one day I was a little too footloose and fancy free and was kind of dancing around, and I leapt off a log and broke my foot upon my meeting with the ground, so to speak. And heavens to Betsy, that was painful, but it healed pretty good later, so it wasn't all bad.
And that is why logging is a men's work.
Oh, that is so not true. You're gonna get a beating tonight.
So with all this logging going on, we ran out of areas to log locally, and so we ended up finding opportunities in the early 1950s over in California, in Northern California. We went over to Humboldt County, where there was massive expanses of redwoods and Douglas firs to harvest. We got stumpage rights to about 2,300 square acres of land. And so Lula came down with me, as did our sons and their young families, and we logged all that with 2 sawmills. One was a large one was a small one. But Lula didn't really like living down there, and even though we had found a nice place in Arcata, we ended up coming back in 1960 to Longview at Lula's prompting.
And actually, I didn't really like California that much. It was nice and green like it is here in Washington, but it was really foggy a lot of the time out in the bay and in the county as well out there. And it just was much more pleasant and sunny up here. I just liked it better. But I do have to say that was probably one of the most exciting times of our lives, though, because we got to see our grandkids being born and we got to see them grow up, and that was just really exciting.
And by 1964, we had a nice house off of Hooper Road in Abernathy that had 2 acres of land with flowers and grass that could keep Lula happy. We were away from the big city. And in 1969, I sold my 1/3 share of the company to fund our retirement. And we have enjoyed that ever since. In fact, we had our 60th wedding anniversary here in Stella in 1986. And we had, at that time, 6 children, 18 grandchildren, and 20 great-grandchildren.
Yes.
So we have quite a progeny there going on.
Oh, yeah.
And unfortunately, though, later that year in 1986, on December 12th, I ended up passing on into the next world.
I would eventually pass on as well, as we all do, but I stuck around for another 9 years. I wanted to see all those kids grow up. So So, that was great. And then eventually I passed. And this is our beautiful headstone. It commemorates our life together. And you can see here on the back the design that we picked. It models the lifestyle that we chose for our lives. How this is our legacy. And so we hope you've enjoyed the presentation. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask. You're welcome.
Thank you. Very good. Very. So now, that's the daughter and son back there?
So a lot of the kids are here. That is one of the daughters with her husband. This one here is little Joyce with her husband. One of the boys, Marvin, is Gail. He's over there where there's two big sets of flowers on both sides. And then my grandpa, he's not here yet, but my biological grandmother, she's here. And then someday.
Great grandchildren.
So we're great. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I'm a great granddaughter. So. And then we have.
Little Lauren, the wife, the one that fell out of the car. And her daughter Gail. And another one of the great grandkids, Jeffrey, right there in the dark.
Yeah.
I think it is just absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
You guys are, yeah, it really is. I mean, I don't know any of these people, but it's just interesting listening to the story.
There was a whole big group in the first group that were from the family too.
Wow. This is more like a big family.
name is Hilia Aho, and that's the way that we pronounced it in the Finnish home where I grew up in Stella. I was born August 19th, 1905 to immigrant parents, and I was one of 12 children. Dad was a logger, and he also farmed, and Mom helped him. This is my husband, Albert.
Hello, my name is Albert Jacob Wiest. I was born January 1st, 1908 in Portland, Oregon to Alice and Jacob Wiest of Stella. Spent my first 19 years on the farm, going to school and working in logging camps. School is District Number 70 in the family camp of Wisconsin Logging and Timber Company on Upper Abernathy Creek. Started work at the Midway Logging Company camp in 1924 at the age of 16, splitting wood for a 12x14 Willamette compound donkey engine on a scraper, making a cut and fill around a hill. It took us 3.5 months to complete the job, working 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. Some camps didn't work on Sundays, some did. When we did get a day off, we'd take off for Portland for the red light district and a suitcase full of moonshine to last us until the next day off.
Moonshine? I don't want to talk about moonshine. I'll tell you, I worked in those camps too, but moonshine was the thing that got me into a lot of trouble. You know, my second husband was a bootlegger during Prohibition. And there I was. I'd just been deserted by my first husband. I had a toddler and a newborn. Here came Wesley. He was charming, he was handsome, and he had money. Well, I should have known right then something was wrong. 1927, 28, Depression in 29, nobody had anything. But Wesley, he had money and he had a place up on Ostrander. So he wanted to get married. I couldn't believe how lucky I was. So I moved up to Ostrander. Then I found out he was down in the town taking money for alcohol and sending the customers up to Ostrander for me to give them the alcohol. So I said, we will not be doing this. And he said, oh, we will. And you'll be quiet about it because the person that they can identify as the one who gave them the alcohol is you. But Sheriff was wise to that. And he got Wesley on a distilling charge. Sent him to McNeil for 3 years. I was happy to be shed of him. But you know, all of his helper people were still around and they were watching
Robinson, and we had one son, Ronald Earl. We got divorced in 1944. In 1968, I married Hillia Aho Fournier. I'll let my lovely wife Hillia tell you about doings in the cookhouse at the logging camp, but I can tell you about the rest.
Well, the cookhouse. Now that was a busy place. You know, there was a team of us. We worked from sun up to sundown. Cook was the head honcho, and then we had assistant cooks, prep cooks, dishwashers, people who waited table. It was busy. We were in that kitchen at 3 o'clock in the morning, mixing up the bread, set it to rise. Next thing we did, we put on the breakfast meat. We had bacon, sausage, ham steaks or beef steaks, some combination of that every morning for breakfast. Then we would start hot cereal, quick breads if we were going to make them, pancakes, and of course we already had the fruit prepped and coffee, lots and lots of coffee. Then the breakfast bell would ring and here they would come. We'd take those big steaming platters out and those bowls of fruit, we'd start pouring coffee. Two of us would peel off, come over to the lunch table, and we would put out all the lunch food because those guys ate quick, and as soon as they were done, they would take their lunch buckets over there and they would pack their own lunches. They knew what they wanted, they knew how much they needed, and we always put out quality food. They could take whatever they want and they could take as much as they want. And then lickety-split, they were out the door. Again, we divided into two groups. One of us would clear up the mess from breakfast and lunch preparations. The other half of us would start the prep cook at night for the night meal. So we would do our sides, we'd toss salads, we'd start the desserts, get everything done that we could do. After the whole mess was cleaned up, then we get started on the camp cleaning. First order of business was the bunkhouse. I'm going to turn it back to Bill and let him talk about that.
Oh, bunkhouses were 2 men with single bunks. Some camps had 4 or 5 men bunkhouses, but all with single beds. The bathhouses had wooden or concrete floors, 3 to 5 shower stalls, and a washroom in the back where you could wash your clothes. Companies provided the soap. Toilets were generally 2 or 3 holers not far behind the bunkhouses. Hammond and Caroline camps each had 9 full toilets, but the Horseshoe camp just had a long 4x4 timber where you sat over. One night at floor camp number 1, the whole crew got poisoned by a bad batch of canned corn, and everyone was running to the toilets all night. Only time I ever knew of a shortage of the toilets, and we ran out among the stumps.
Now, Albert, do you want to know what really happened that night? Had nothing to do with bad corn.
What?
Yeah. So, here's the thing. You know, when you're on this team in the cookhouse, the very bottom job is the dishwasher. And there is a procedure for washing dishes. So you take your pans and pots and pans, and when they're scorched in the bottom of it, you soap it up, and then you add some ash and you scrub it clean. You rinse it well. Soap it up again, scrub it, rinse it well, and then you put it in a bleach rinse and you put it up in the drying rack to air dry. Well, we had somebody new that night, Little Miss Shortcut, we called her. So she gets in there, she scours it and rinses it, she soaks it up again, and then licking a promise, she's done with the rinse and throws it up there in that drying rack. Well, we didn't know that. We got that kettle down and put corn in it for dinner. And it foamed. Of course it foamed a little bit. It was corn. Well, we didn't think anything of it. Then about an hour after dinner, figured it out. So, Albert, I have to tell you, it is true that you guys had the cleanest colons in Longview that night for more than one reason.
Yes, indeed. Well, some camps use scrip as a means of money in camp, but I never saw any. I did see and handle lots of tokens. The tokens were usually stamped out of brass or aluminum in nickel, dime, quarter, $half, and dollar sizes. Joe Flora had a number of thousands of dollars of tokens stamped out to use in his camps. It made things easier for the timekeeper, as he didn't have to keep track of each purchase. And the local bank in town would even exchange it for U.S. money. Soon, though, Joe Flora realized that his tokens were being counterfeited and decided to call them all in. Now, some never got turned in, some got lost or burned up, but Joe Flora redeemed twice as much as he'd had stamped out. Logging in those days was done by high lead or North Bend skyline system. Skidders and slackline systems were just coming into use. In those days, the skyline carriages and high lead blocks were not greased as in later years. Different bearings, I guess, but the oil reservoirs in them would last a year between fillings. Now, the locomotives used to all the log cars were Baldwins on the main line. Up in the woods or on steeper grades, Shays, Heislers, and Climaxes were used. The log cars that we used in the woods were Lincoln pin type with handbrakes. And the logs would be cut to 64, 72, or 80 foot. Sometimes we'd cut shorter logs out of tops and brakes, but if it was shorter than 32 foot, we would not set a choker on it. If the logs had to be shipped to Portland, they had to be cut down to fit on the 40-foot mainline cars. Now, the donkey engines we used were Smith & Watson's, Seattle Simplexes, or Willamette compounds, all of which burned wood. Some of them were later converted to burn oil. Then came the 2-speeds and high speeds. They also started as wood burners, but were later converted to oil as insurance companies got forest fire conscious and humidity wise.
Yeah, you know, you remember that donkey doctor? Bill Fournier? He was my husband. He was my next husband after Wesley got himself killed in a shootout, but we're not going to talk about that. You know, Bill, the thing about Bill was, he said what he really wanted was to be a family man. He wanted to help me raise my kids. He wanted to help on the farm. And he said he helped get me on at Weyerhaeuser Timber Company. So I married him. I left that cookhouse behind and I signed on with Weyerhaeuser Timber. And at that point I became a woodsman in my own right. So I will tell you right now that it was definitely a dangerous job. So Bill, why don't you tell these folks about fire hazard? Because I think they need to know.
Well, in August of 1926 was the first time I heard of and worked a hoot owl shift, where we start work at sunup and work as much as we can until we shutting down during the heat of the day due to low humidity. Lowest humidity I ever saw was in September of 1929, when we had 13 dry hot days in a row with an east wind. Humidity got down to 0 and only up to during the day and only up to 10 or 12 at night. Forest fires started from many causes, and I helped to fight some even with snow on the ground in places. Now, it was an unwritten rule in camp that when you heard that fire whistle blow, just drop what you are doing and get to that fire pronto. One night after supper, the night watchman blew the fire whistle, and we knew it was a bad one as he kept on blowing. The fire was about 2 miles from camp, no steam in any of the machines, so we had to run with fire tools up a 23% incline and outgrade for over a mile. Luckily, the fire was not too far from water, and 150 men formed a bucket brigade, and the fire was soon out. Now, during fire season, tailor-made cigarettes were not allowed to be sold or brought into camp. Roll your own could be smoked at the yard or the landing, but not in the woods. Now, us choker setters, we pretty much smoked whenever we took a notion to, and we were never caught at it, but I bet the stool pigeons reported us to the bosses more than once. And, well, with the Depression hitting the timber industry hard in 1931, I decided it was time to try a new line of work. I'd been taking mechanic classes in Portland during the winter months, so I was able to get a job with Longview School Bus Garage as a mechanic and driver. I drove the Oak Point route for a year, and then the Eufaula route for 3.5 years. Then in 1935, I decided to leave and become the night watchman at the State Training School in Chehalis, and also later became assistant farmer there. But in 1940, when 25,000 Army boys showed up to start training for combat there at the state training grounds, there's State Training School grounds. I decided it was time to get out of there. So in 1940, I started work at Weyerhaeuser as on the green chain in mills number 1, 2, and 3, and also stacking lumber for the dry kiln. I lasted 10 years there until I was forced out by the May strike of 1950. After that, I just helped Mother on the farm. I bought her new milking machines and $3,000 worth of farm equipment to help her out so she wouldn't have to do as much in her old age. I did some independent logging then, and also worked for logger Bob Reed. About every year, Mother or I would sell Bob a strip of timber to log. Then in 1960, I decided to turn that logged off land into a tree farm. I scarified the ground and would buy 2-1 fir seedlings whenever I could buy them. Company foresters thought I was a bit silly doing it my way, but now they all do it that way, unless they burn first. I used to plant just fir seedlings, but now in the creeks and the wet spots I have to plant cedar with a little bit of hemlock thrown in. Over the years I must have planted 65 or 70,000 fir seedlings on my tree farm.
And me, I worked for Weyerhaeuser Timber for 32 years as a woodsman. Then I retired, and here comes this guy. And he said, "Hell yeah, what do you think about getting married?" I said, "Why in the world would you want to marry a woman who's pushing 70 years old?" And he said, "Well," he said, "I would like to have someone to ride around with me in my truck." And he said, "And I would like to have someone to sit with me on the porch at night and rock." And he said, "And I like to have somebody drink a beer with." And I thought, that sounds pretty good. So I said yes, and I'm glad I did, because we had 20 good years together.
Now, Mother died in 1970. Hillia and I continued on with the farm and tree farm until she died in 1993. I missed her so much, I only lasted another 11 months myself. Thank you.
And while we're here at the cemetery, we'll take a quick look at my parents' gravestone. My dad passed away in 2001, Albert Smith, and my mother is Martha Smith. She passed away in 97, age 86. Dad was 94. And my brother's on here, he's still with us, David. He has some health issues. So that's why you don't see a date for death for David. He's still with us.